My name is Clara Villela. I am the widow of Ottavio Villela, founder of Ventusal Energy, one of the most respected renewables companies in the country. For 48 years, I was the perfect wife, the partner, the confidant, the invisible backbone. Today, as I walk toward his casket, I realize I might have been nothing more than a background character in my own story. First, thank you to the channel Buried by Family for hearing me. And if you're here listening, I'll ask one thing before we go on. Hit like right now, because what I'm about to tell you may sound like fiction, but it's just the kind of truth most families prefer to bury. The organ filled the chapel. Not the kind of music that comforts, just the kind that makes the air heavier. The room smelled of lilies, expensive candles, expensive incense, everything perfectly curated, perfectly cold. At the center, the casket. And inside it, the man the world called a genius, the visionary, the patriarch, the man who, they say, put the Villela name among the greats. I walked toward him slowly, not from weakness but because every step was a wound reopening. Almost 50 years beside someone teaches you to move slowly in front of truth. His face looked peaceful, a wax kind of peace, the peace of a lie. Ottavio always had a gift for appearing as something he wasn't. Around me, whispers, fragmented words, quick glances. I could feel the murmurs brushing against my skin, as if the whole room knew something I didn't. Pedro, my eldest, stood beside the casket, black tie, perfect posture, a corporate tone, even in mourning. Next to him, Camila, my daughter, beautiful, elegant, rehearsed. They ran the event like a press conference, not their father's funeral. When they saw me, they simply nodded. No hug, no mom, just a formal acknowledgement. And that look that says more than any words, hold yourself together, but don't say too much. Something in my chest stirred. Part dread, part exhaustion. That's when the silence shifted. The doors opened, a murmur rippled through the guests. 3 people walked in, a woman in her early 40s, elegant, composed, beside her, 2 children, and a young man, about 20. For a second, the world stopped. The organ went silent. Even the air held its breath. Pedro turned ... and smiled. Camila raised her hand slightly, like greeting someone familiar. The woman, Isidora Figueiredo, smiled back, and then I understood. There wasn't just one family in that room. My body froze. The guests stole glances at me, trying to guess whether I knew, but they didn't know what to do when they saw my face. Stay serene. Serenity is the perfect disguise for a woman who's just died on the inside. Pedro approached Isidora, whispered something. She nodded. The children ran toward Camila and hugged her. My nephews, Camila said, smiling. Nephews. The words sliced through the air like a blade. The priest asked for silence. Ottavio Villela was an honest man, a pioneer, a devoted husband. Double quotes. The word husband cut through me. On the podium, Pedro spoke next. My father believed in hard work, ethics, and family. Family. The audience applauded like it was a show. Then came Camila. My father taught me that nothing matters more than unity, that the foundation of everything is family. The same word, the same lie. She looked at me for a second. Our eyes met, then quickly looked away, as if contact burned. That's when I realized it wasn't just Ottavio who lived a double life. My children had chosen his side. When the speeches ended, the priest invited friends of the family to say a few words. That's when Isidora walked toward the altar. Pedro helped her up the steps. She stood beside the casket, voice trembling. Ottavio was more than a life partner. He was my example, my guide, and the father of my children. The word father detonated inside me. The room froze. People tried to act normal, but the discomfort was thick. Some avoided eye contact, others ... recorded. Camila wept, but not for me. For her, when Isidora finished, the silence was absolute. I closed my eyes and thought, 48 years of fidelity. And betrayal arrives with flowers and candles. As guests approached to say goodbye, some stopped by me with phrases like, "He was an extraordinary man, Mrs. Villela. You two were the perfect couple, an example of unity," and I smiled. Smiled like someone holding poison and calling it wine. When it was finally over, I stood alone before the casket. "Congratulations, Ottavio," I whispered. "Even in death, you managed to humiliate me with elegance." I touched the wood, cold, polished, perfect, just like him. Beautiful on the outside, hollow within. From the hallway, I heard Isidora's voice. "He promised me everything would be settled." After the new plant launch, he'd make it official. Official. The word lingered. I left without looking back. Cameras flashed. Headlines already drafted. Ottavio Villela leaves behind an energy empire and a legacy of love and unity. Unity. The irony nearly made me laugh. Back home, the mansion felt enormous. Every wall an echo, every portrait a lie. I sat on the couch, realizing that for the first time, I wasn't alone because he was gone. I was alone because I could finally see what had always been there. For years, they said I was the balance of the family, but too much balance is just anesthesia. I opened an old photo, the inauguration of Venesol's first turbine. Ottavio was smiling. Behind him, I held the permits. The caption read, Ottavio Villela, founder, only his name. The company had always rested in my hands, but the credit in his. I walked into his office, perfectly arranged, polished, wood-lined folders, glass awards. I opened the main drawer. Documents, pens, a stopwatch, and at the bottom, an envelope, my name on it, Clara inside. A contract from Ventisol Energy, signed by Ottavio Augusto Villela, and below it, Clara Carta Villela, my maiden name. It read, in case of moral misconduct compromising the company's image, all patents registered under Helix Holdings shall revert to its technical co-founder, Mrs. Clara Carta Villela. My heart raced. Helix Holdings, a name I hadn't heard in years. The holding company I created when I funded the first inverter patents. I thought it had been absorbed, but it hadn't. It still existed, and the contract proved half the empire was tied to me, not as wife, but as partner. Behind the contract, a letter, handwritten, if pride ever blinds me, may truth return. What's yours? What we built doesn't die, it just changes hands. I stood there, holding those papers, the weight of a lifetime folded into 2 pages. Tears came, not of pain, but of fury and release. You thought you could bury me with you, Ottavio? I whispered. Guess what? This time, I'm the one coming back to life. I folded the letter carefully. Outside, a ray of sunlight pierced the gray sky. And I knew that funeral wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of my justice. People thought that funeral was the end of my story. They had no idea they were witnessing my rebirth. The morning after the funeral, the house felt bigger than ever. The silence had weight, not the kind that comes from absence, but from what's been said too loudly to ignore. I woke before sunrise, still wearing the same black dress. The smell of the flowers clung to the fabric, as if I needed help remembering. I didn't. I remembered every look, every whisper, every smile that hid pity. I sat in the living room and watched my coffee go cold. For years, that had been his spot. Now, it was just an empty space that smelled like the past. The phone rang. The number belonged to an old friend, Lucia, a retired journalist, one of those who always knew more than they ever published. Clara, I saw everything on TV. How are you? Pause. I breathed. That depends. Do you want to know how I really am, or how I look? Silence on the other end. Really, I'm alive. And for now, that's enough. Lucia hesitated, then lowered her voice. There's something you should know. Last night the press got a statement from Ventesol's PR. They wrote that Ottavio planned to regularize a personal situation. Those exact words. I closed my eyes. Regularize a personal situation. A pretty euphemism for 2 families, 1 inheritance. Who sent it? Signed by Pedro. But the phrasing, that sounds like Camila. Of course it did. They had written their father's script to the last act. I hung up and stared at the ceiling. That's when an old memory crashed in. 15 years earlier. Same office. Another sleepless night. Ventisol was on the brink. Turbines idle. Government late on payments. Investors pulling out. He said it was the end, that the Villela name would die with him. It was raining. I walked in wearing a wet coat, a folder in my hands. Inside was the contract that would save it all. The pilot project for Helix Holdings. My idea. A control system for inverters that would lower production costs and stabilize the grid. This is crazy, Clara, he said, exhausted. Crazy is giving up now. No one will trust a failing company. Then they'll trust me. He stared. Long, heavy. You. Yes, me. Under my maiden name, Clara Carter. That was the first time he truly saw me, not as a wife, but as the person capable of saving what he'd lost. 2 days later, I traveled. 3 meetings, 4 contracts, 21 hours on the road, and I came back with the first investors. When I walked in, he was at the table, drained. He stood up when he saw me, with a look I'll never forget. You did this alone. No, I did it for us. He stepped closer. I don't know what I'd do without you, Clara. Then don't forget it. But he did. Or chose to. The ticking clock pulled me back to the present, mocking me. Time warns you. You're the one who doesn't listen. That afternoon, Camila called. Soft voice, rehearsed. Mom, are you okay? Why wouldn't I be? I just wanted to know if you need anything. An explanation, maybe. Silence. I could hear discomfort breathing through the line. Mom, Dad. Dad had a complicated life. He loved you, but he loved someone else too. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean, Camita, that you chose to stand by him knowing everything? We only wanted to avoid scandal. Dad was a public figure. I laughed, low, humorless. He was a public man. And me, a footnote. I just want peace. Peace is a prize for those without guilt, darling. You still have to earn yours. I hung up. By late afternoon, Pedro showed up without warning. He walked in like he still owned the house. Dark suit, expensive watch, the same superiority he inherited from his father. We need to talk, Mom. Now you remember, I'm your mother. He ignored that. The company has to move forward. There are worried shareholders, pending contracts, an image to protect. Image, yes. The family's image, the family. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, Petro. You prefer to keep the facade intact, even if the foundation is rotten. He tried to keep control, but fear leaked through his eyes. I know this was a shock, but you can't let anger destroy what Dad built. Oh, my son, I'm the one who built it, and you're about to learn what destruction really is. He swallowed. I just hope you don't do something you'll regret. My regret is 50 years old. The rest is just consequence. When the door closed, fear gave way to clarity. And that's when the voices began. Not ghosts' memory. Time. Conversations we pretend to forget, but the heart files away. The first was Ottavio's voice, on one of our rare peaceful dinners. He was talking about the company's future. You know, Clara, the world will remember my name. I smiled. Yours, Ottavio. Or ours. He laughed. Mine, of course. But you know, every man needs a solid base, and every base needs to know when to stop holding the weight. Back then, he thought it was a joke. Now I know it was a prophecy. Later, I needed to keep my hands busy. I opened an old box in the guest room. Photos, documents, newspaper clippings. One face I hadn't seen in decades. Daniel Moretti. We studied together in technical school. He read turbine manuals like novels. While others praised my looks, he praised my mind. You see, systems like poetry, he'd say. We lost touch after I married Ottavio. He became an engineer, an attorney, worked in Brasilia on energy regulation, then São Paulo. We never spoke again. That night, I received an email from the family lawyer, Dr. Augusto Nogueira, hedging off the wheel Friday, 10 a.m. Ventisal, HQ. Court-appointed independent experts will be present. Independent experts. The phrase sparked a suspicion, or maybe a memory. The doorbell rang. Lucia stood there with a beige coat and worried eyes. She handed me an envelope. This arrived at the old newsroom, addressed to Mrs. Clara Carter, must be 20 years old. My maiden name. My heart kicked. Inside was a letter. The handwriting was unmistakable. Ottavius, if I'm gone and things get messy, look for Helix. What's yours by right is there. And if anyone tries to tell you otherwise, remember, the gold of truth never loses its shine, even under mud. It ended with, forgive me for loving you the wrong way. Ottavio had a gift for turning guilt into poetry. Want me to publish something? Lucia asked. Not yet. You're going to let this slide? No, Lucia. I'm just choosing the price. Later, I sat in his office chair and felt at home there for the first time. I imagined how many times he'd sat in that exact spot lying to me and to himself. The difference was, now I was in control. I reread the Helix contract. The words breathed, grave moral breaches, public image compromised, automatic reversion of control. Everything I needed was right there. I just didn't know where to start. A noise in the hallway startled me. It was only the wall clock, the same one Ottavio got on Ventisal's first anniversary. It had been stopped for months. Now, without anyone touching it, it started up again. A slow tick-tock, almost symbolic. I smiled. Maybe coincidence. Or the universe whispering, time moves when truth wakes up. I began to write dates, names, documents, lines I'd heard. And, without noticing, I started writing about myself too, how I'd shrunk to fit his life, how I taught my children to admire their father, and never me. Each line was a confession. Each confession, a cure. Days later, as I reviewed documents, the phone rang from an unknown number. Mrs. Villa. Yes, this is Dr. Daniel Moretti, the court-appointed expert for the Ventisol estate. For a moment, the world stopped. I knew that voice, deeper now, steadier, but the same calm. Daniel, it's been a long time, I know, too long. Seems fate loves irony. You're going to need me, Clara, and honestly, I needed to see you. That night, I didn't sleep. Not from sorrow, for the first time since the funeral, but from anticipation. The past was circling back. Old voices were joining the present. The woman who walked into that funeral in silence was not the woman who would sit for the reading of the will. Houses have memory. Sometimes they speak in creaks, in slivers of light that sneak in, even with the curtains closed. The morning after Daniel's call, I walked the corridors like a traveler tracing an old map. Each door, a memory. Each painting, an invented version of us. I felt something new. Not anger, not sadness, clarity. Ottavio's office sat unchanged, polished wood, expensive varnish, shelves lined with trophies. I ran a finger along a frame. Innovation Award, Ventisol Energy. I smiled. Innovation, a word I recognized instantly. I was the one who wrote it into those early projects when no one believed wind and sun could pay the bills. I opened the highest drawer. Folders, contracts, quarterly reports, and a small gold key with a worn blue ribbon. Instinct guided me to a nearly invisible seam behind the corner bookshelf. A hidden drawer. The key slid in like it had been waiting. The click was quiet. Inside me, it thundered. A gray notebook without a title. A small flash drive, banded to the spine. I opened the notebook, Ottavio's handwriting tight, straight, emotionless margins, numbers, projections, maps of wind farms. Then, halfway through, the dawn of the beginning. Dawn. Before Helix, the holding had been called Aurora Holdings. I sketched the logo on our kitchen table. I chose the colors. I paid the first deposit with my father's inheritance. The flash drive. I plugged it into his laptop. Password. Once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th, I closed my eyes and typed the name that came before all the others. Carter_1971. It opened. Dated folders, internal reports, and a video file. board_extra_meeting_2010.mp4. I hit play. The shaky video showed a small room, a long table, men in light suits, coffee in plastic cups, Ottavio at the center, younger, trying to look confident. To his right, Engineer Braga, from Vendisol's early days. 3 directors I knew by name, if not by character. A voice off camera. Let's put on record that Aurora Holdings, holder of the inverter system patents, composes the company's technical co-founding structure. One director cut in. That's not wise on paper. The media loves to confuse. Braga pushed back. Without Aurora, we don't get past the pilot. Tense silence. Ottavio stared ahead, the eyes of a man desperate to be loved by everyone. Then he said, "Record it in the minutes." Clara pulled us back from the edge. The world might not know it, but I do. I paused the video. The room was silent. So was I not. Satisfaction, validation. That tiny recording was worth more than a dozen eulogies. It was the first visible brick of the truth. I copied the file, emailed it to myself, then to a secure drive and, just in case, to Daniel. 2 minutes later, a read receipt. Daniel, received. This is gold. Keep the physical media. We'll use it precisely. Gold. An old word in my story. This time, not jewelry, evidence. I went downstairs for coffee. No sugar. I wanted the full taste of things. Texts lit the phone. Pedro, we need to align a few points before the will reading. 4 p.m. Ventisol HQ. Camila, Mom, please, no friction. The brand is under attack. The brand, the favorite word of people who confuse family with a PR campaign. Me, I'll be there at 4. Bring whatever you need me to see. I have things for you too. I deleted it and resent the only message I owed them. 4 p.m. At 3:40, I stood at Ventisol's glass doors, impeccable lobby, photos of wind farms on the walls, motivational phrases that now read like inside jokes. Mrs. Villela, the board is waiting in room 3. Room 3. Glass walls, oval table, big screen. Pedro at the head, Camila to his right, their aide tapping on a tablet. Two directors who once asked for my blessing to hire their nephews. I sat without asking. My hands were steady. My voice, exact. Shall we? Pedro adjusted his tie. We shall. Here's the situation. The press wants answers. There was noise. At the funeral. Leaks. You know. I know. So we need to align the institutional message. Message. Yes. Dad had a complex personal life. You're the victim. But preferred discretion. And Ventisol stays focused on the future. You think I'm going to lend my silence to your narrative? Camila tried. Gentle mom. Please. Don't make this harder. Hard starts now. I took a clear folder from my bag and laid it on the table. On top, the conditional transfer contract between Ventisol and Helix. Under it, the printed minutes from the video file. Pedro's face changed first. Camila's followed 2 seconds later. What is this? He asked, already knowing the beginning of the truth. Back in 2010, Ventisol recognized Helix as technical co-founder and IP holder for the inverter system. In case of moral breaches, compromising governance and public image, and you know exactly what I'm referring to, control reverts to Helix, which is mine, in my maiden name, Clara Carter. Silence, the heavy kind that decides things. You wouldn't do this, Pedro said. I already did. You'll destroy everything. No, I'll rebuild once, and the right way. Camila went for the last resort. Think of the employees, the investors, the impact. I've thought of everyone my whole life. No one thought of me. It's my turn. Their aide tried. From a legal standpoint, we'd have to assess the applic. It's being assessed. Right on cue, the door opened. Daniel Moretti walked in crisp shirt, discreet tie, neatly trimmed beard. The same calm eyes, the kind that don't look away when truth walks in. Good afternoon. I'm the court-appointed expert overseeing the estate and governance matters tied to the patents and conditional clauses. He shook my hand. Clara, Daniel. Pedro clenched his jaw. We weren't informed of this visit. The court was, Daniel said. The agenda is simple. Documents, standards, evidence. He placed stamped copies on the table, then put the clause on the screen. Fine print flooded with light and validity. There is also audio-visual material corroborating the 2010 minutes, plus email logs from that period referencing Aurora as the development code name, the former name of what is now Helix Holdings. Camila squeezed her tissue. Pedro exhaled. I folded my hands and waited. What do you propose, Clara? He asked, walking the line between order and plea. Stop treating truth like a leak. Treat it like governance. I watched the fracture appear in my son's face. When a man meets a limit, he either grows or shouts. He tried to grow. Growth hurts. And what happens to us? He asked. To you? You stop being owners and start being responsible. Daniel closed the presentation. I recommend we proceed with the will reading as scheduled while we trigger the reversion clause to protect value, jobs, and contracts. The best way through a storm is transparency. He glanced at me, brief enough to say, you're not alone. And one more thing, he added, turning to them. Heir's complicity with a parallel family structure isn't a domestic drama, it's a material risk to the brand and public contracting. Ethics isn't decoration, it's compliance. I left the room before the end, not to flee, but because I wanted to choose my exits. On the balcony, the Ventisol totem reflected the sky, high clouds, a stubborn strip of blue. Daniel joined me a few minutes later. Ready for the noise? I've heard enough noise. I'm ready for respect. You haven't changed, he said. I have. I just went back to who I was. Remember your tech school presentation? He teased. You built a wind generator out of a pot lid and a broken fan. And it worked. It did. That day I decided I'd work with you someday. You took your time, I said. Fate made me late. But I'm here. We returned to wrap up. Pedro wouldn't meet my eyes. Camila fought to fix her makeup with dignity. The directors looked at each other, calculating survival. Let's go read the will, I said. Then we'll move on to what matters. And what's that? Pedro asked. What always should have mattered. Truth, work, and the weight of a name. In the hall, my phone buzzed. Lucia, a source says, you triggered a reversion clause. True, yes. Can I publish? I looked at Daniel. He said nothing. His silence gave me the answer. You can. Write this. It's not revenge. It's governance. That'll be a headline. It doesn't need to be. It just needs to be an example. It'll sting a little, Daniel warned. I know pain. What I didn't know was the taste of hearing myself. The elevator doors closed. In the stainless steel, I saw myself, no mourning in my face, no fear in my hands, not fury, strength. Outside, wind lifted my hair. The Ventisol sign flashed as sunlight hit the exact angle. I thought of Ottavio, not with hatred, but with conclusion. You taught me to build foundations. Now I'll teach you how not to collapse. I walked away, not fast, not slow, at my pace. Back home, silence didn't suffocate me, it arranged me. I spread papers across the desk, the contract, the letter, the minutes, pieces of a story finally falling into place. Ottavio believed power lived in speeches, real power lived in signatures, and every signature that mattered had my name on it. I called our longtime attorney, Dr. Augusto Nogueira. My condolences again, Mrs. Villela. How can I help? I want to file an addendum, discreet, urgent, to your husband's will. No, to my legacy. Good lawyers don't need all the words, just the right ones. The next morning, in my private office, the old project wing at home, I handed him Helix's documents. I want Ventisol's IP and dividends to answer to Helix permanently, and I want to build something new from it. A foundation. I nodded. The Horizon Foundation, to help women over 50 start over. The world is generous to widows. As long as they stay quiet, this will make noise, then we'll make music out of it. We signed. The notary seal was still damp when I slid the papers into a brown envelope. Ink smudged my fingertips. I liked it. Proof of life. That night on the porch, I watched the wind farm blades on the horizon turn like slow knives. For years I turned other people's worlds. Now, mine was finally moving. Daniel texted, tomorrow, 10 a.m., the will. And the start of the interesting part. For the first time in a long time, I smiled. The clerk's office was cold on purpose. These rooms are built to test who can stay still the longest. I was prepared to spend the day there if I had to. Pedro arrived first, tight-tied, tired eyes. Then Camila, with that smile that never reaches her eyes. And then Isadora, the woman from the funeral, with her 2 young children and the older boy. Ottavio's eyes, Ottavio's way of staring at the floor when he felt watched. The lawyer opened a folder, adjusted his glasses. We'll begin the reading of the last will and testament of Mr. Ottavio Villela. His neutral voice struck like a hammer. I, Ottavio Augusto Villela, being of sound mind, I leave to my wife Clara Villela, our residence, personal effects, and a symbolic share of Ventisol energy stock. Symbolic. The most offensive adjective is a polite one. To my children, Pedro and Camila, I leave management of the group and control of the shares. To Ms. Isadora Figueiredo, I leave the property in Florianopolis and a lifetime stipend. Camila lowered her head. Pedro kept his chin up, performing steadiness. Isadora cried in silence. And then the last line, above all, I ask for respect. The truth each one holds is the only legacy that can't be divided. Respect. After a life built on lies, the lawyer cleared his throat. There's also a handwritten letter, addressed to Mrs. Clara. I opened it slowly, his handwriting. If you're reading this, silence got here before explanation. I failed trying to be 2 men at once. In the end, I wasn't whole for anyone. If there's any justice in this world, it will find its way to you. I looked around. No one breathed. Pedro stood. Mom, I know this is hard, but hard. Hard is watching what we built turn into a story of convenience. Please, not here, Camila whispered. Right here, Camila. This is where he made the lie official. Isadora dabbed her eyes, avoiding my gaze. Her children watched, confused innocence that maybe I'd never seen in my own. Are we done? I asked the lawyer. Yes, ma'am. Then it's my turn. I placed my folder on the table, the freshly registered addendum, the Helix documents, and the notice triggering the ethics clause. This changes the game. And this time, no one is erasing my name. Pedro frowned. What is that? The part of the story you pretended didn't exist. Daniel entered quietly, greeted the lawyer, nodded to me, and announced, Mrs. Clara Villela, legitimate co-founder of Ventisol, has just filed the contractual addendum. Under the moral reversion clause, control of the patents passes immediately to Helix Holdings. The room became a minefield. Pedro went pale. Camila covered her mouth. Isadora stepped back. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and said nothing. Silence. Daniel ended it. The era of appearances is over. I left before anyone tried to stop me. Outside, the wind was strong, the sky clear. I heard Ottavio's old line in my head: "The wind belongs to no one, Clara." Today, the wind was on my side. The next morning's headlines mixed surprise with respect. Helix Holdings assumes control of Ventisol Energy. Widow triggers ethics clause. Clara Villela takes over. I read them over coffee.com. For years, I'd written his talking points on good governance. Today, I was the talking point. My phone wouldn't stop. Messages, emails, interview requests. I accepted none. I spoke to one person, Daniel. "They're in a panic," he said. Voice even then, "It's working. The board wants an emergency meeting. They'll have one, with me at the head of the table." That afternoon, I walked into Ventisol, wearing the same black dress from the funeral. Not for mourning, for symbolism. Death of an era, start of another. "Gentlemen," I began, "as of today, Helix controls Ventisol's patents and technical operations. The company's purpose doesn't change, only the ownership of the truth." A director coughed, trying to reclaim tone. "But the market impact could. The market adapts. Morality doesn't." Across the table, Camila kept her eyes down. Pedro tried to hold posture, but his trembling hands betrayed him. "You still have a place here," I said. "But you'll relearn what inheritance means. Inheritance isn't control. It's responsibility." Daniel watched, taking notes not to support me, but to remind me I wasn't a spectator anymore. I was the author. After the meeting, the wind outside slammed the flags as if celebrating. "You turned the game in under 72 hours, Daniel said. "No, I just showed it was always mine." That night, I signed the last document, the formal creation of the Horizon Foundation. The ink was barely dry when Lucia called. "Social media is calling you the widow who won't be quiet. Let them. Every story needs a title. What comes next is the plot." 3 days later, the empire began to crack, not because of me, but under the weight of its own lies. Ventisol's shares dropped 12% at the opening bell. The press smelled blood. Villela children contest reversion clause. Family split. Who betrayed whom? I read quietly, the way someone reads whether not surprised by the storm. Camila called. "Mom. Pedro's spiraling. He says he'll go on TV, that he'll expose you." "Expose what?" "He thinks you're getting revenge." "Revenge destroys. I just stripped the varnish, so everyone can see what's been rotting." Later, the inevitable, Pedro stormed into the foundation lobby. No appointment, no security, only rage and regret creasing his face. "You destroyed everything," he shouted. "I rebuilt what your father threw away. You should protect the family, not humiliate us." Family. Family doesn't erase you when you're not in the picture. "I'll go on television." "Do it." "You don't think I will?" "I think you'll lose more than you imagine you'll gain." When he left, Daniel walked in. He'd watched from the next room. "You still care," he said. "I always will. I just learned not to justify myself." "You know what I like about falling," he said. "It separates those who fly from merit and those who float by convenience. Then maybe this is the family's first true flight." That afternoon, social media turned into an arena. Half the country called me a hero, the other half an opportunist. None of it mattered. Other people's judgment is the tax freedom charges. Camila held a press conference. I watched live. She tried to explain, justify, soften, but those tears weren't theater. When a reporter asked, "Do you still speak to your mother?" she hesitated, looked down, and said, "Not yet, but I intend to." It was the first true sentence she'd ever said in public. Lucia called. "You've gone international. News passes, Lucia. Legacy stays. What now?" "I take care of what's left, and what can still bloom." On the porch, the wind surged. The turbines on the horizon spun and spun. They inherited the name. I thought. I inherited courage, and that was enough. 2 weeks later, silence became a headline. Fury became curiosity. Scandal became purpose. The old Ventisol auditorium was packed. Cameras, flashes, microphones. My first public appearance since the reversion. Everyone expected me to attack, justify, or apologize. I did none of the three. I stepped on stage in white, not for purity, for contrast. Behind me, the new logo, Horizon Foundation, a golden blade over a rising sun. For 40 years, I was told to be grateful for standing beside a brilliant man. I began. Today, I understand he was also lucky because he stood beside a patient woman. The Horizon Foundation is born from the moral bankruptcy of an empire, and from the courage to refuse that age, grief, or fear define the end of a story. Here, women over 50 will start again, not asking permission, building the future. Afterward, Daniel came up. You just turned scandal into a manifesto. No, I turned shame into inheritance. That night on my porch, city lights winked below as if at me. I thought about what I'd lost and what I'd gained without noticing. Camila hadn't reached out. Pedro had vanished from the news, but time works for those who don't give up. Letters began to arrive. Women of all ages writing about divorce, layoffs, restarts, every envelope a mirror. Every story a confirmation that I was on the right path. Daniel walked in one afternoon with a newspaper, From Heiress to Mentor. Clara Vallela launches program for mature women. Below it, a photo of me in white, smiling. Whole. They're calling you the woman who broke mourning. Let them. The important thing is that I didn't break myself. That night, I looked at the moon in the window and thought of Ottavio. For the first time, it didn't hurt. Anger had turned into something useful. Strength. The purest gold is the kind that survives the fire. A rainy morning, a court-sealed envelope. I already knew. Pedro and Camila had filed suit, motion to annul the addendum due to emotional incapacity. I laughed to myself. For decades they called me cold, rational, hard. Now I was unstable. The world always finds a new adjective for a woman who refuses to go back to where she was. I called Daniel. I've seen it, he said. It's weak. They're desperate. Desperation is just another form of pride. Do you want to respond immediately? No. I want them to believe they can still win. You're playing with time. Time has always been my ally. I just had to remember. Headlines multiplied. Vallela heirs challenge foundation. Family at war. The press tried to turn reconstruction into spectacle. I kept working. The first Horizon scholarships were approved. The halls filled with women dreaming again. That, in itself, was an answer. Camila arrived one afternoon. No cameras, no makeup, only the eyes of someone who'd finally faced a mirror. I didn't come to fight, she said. That's a good start. I just want to understand why you did this, because you needed to lose to understand the value of what you'd inherited. And Dad, did you forgive him? Forgiveness isn't a gift, it's a certificate of freedom. I'm free, she cried quietly. I didn't apologize. I didn't embrace her. I didn't push her away either. Sometimes silence is the only possible embrace between mother and daughter. The next day Lucia called. Pedro went on TV. What did he say? That you destroyed his father's legacy. Then he finally understands destruction. A notice followed. Hearing in 15 days. With a note, court expert, Dr. Daniel Moretti. I smiled. Fate is cyclical and fair. The courtroom was full, cameras at the door, lawyers lined up like soldiers. I walked in wearing light blue, the color I use to look calm while the world falls apart. Pedro and Camila sat side by side without looking at each other. The silence between them said more than any testimony. May I speak for myself, Your Honor? I asked. You may, Mrs. Vallela. They say I was unstable. Perhaps unstable enough not to accept being erased. Unstable enough to remind the world who actually built what they're trying to defend. My husband had ideas. I executed, while he negotiated promises. I signed contracts. While he slept, I saved the name of the company that now bears my signature. If that's instability, the world needs more unstable women. Does the defense have evidence? The judge asked. Daniel rose, steady, a small recorder in his hand. Yes, Your Honor. A voice memo left by Ottavio Vallela, found among his original documents. He pressed play. Ottavio's voice filled the room. If Clara has to fight alone someday, know that it's because of me. I left her the weight and the right. If there's doubt, remember, without her, nothing would have existed. The air changed density. Camila covered her face. Pedro looked down. The judge took notes in silence. I'm not here for pity, I said. I'm here for memory. 2 weeks later, the decision came. Addendum, valid. Foundation upheld. Action denied. The headlines said resounding victory. For me, it was something else, not victory. Release. That night, the wind didn't fight me. I wrote, power isn't what we win, it's what we no longer need to explain. The news broke early. Clara Vallela wins in court. Horizon Foundation recognized. Years ago, I would have cried. Now I just added more sugar to my coffee. Victory tastes bitter when the crowd cheers and your heart stays quiet. At the foundation, women hugged me, thrilled. They celebrated for me, maybe without knowing that I only wanted to feel the ground again. Daniel arrived at dusk, no tie, sleeves rolled, the serenity of someone who understands the weight of peace. It's over. Nothing's ever over. It just changes shape. He set an envelope down. The official copy of the ruling. Frame it. I don't need it on the wall. It's already here. I tapped my chest. That night, Lucia visited with flowers and cake. Congratulations, Madame Founder. For what? I just survived. Surviving with dignity is victory. The rest is vanity. Then let the rest be theirs. Later, alone, I walked the halls. Photos of the first students. Quotes about starting over. Portraits of rebirth. Something in me still searched for meaning. Does power heal? I wondered. Or only delay pain? I wrote, winning isn't the opposite of losing. It's the price we pay for not giving up. I dreamed of the ocean, the sound from our first trip, 30 years ago, except this time, I was alone on the beach, and it wasn't sadness, it was freedom. In the morning, a message from Daniel. Victory has a price, but it also gives change. Yours is time. Maybe spend a little of it with me. I smiled. I didn't answer. Not yet. Some answers deserve silence first. 2 weeks after the ruling, the ruins appeared, not stoned people. Pride collapses quietly. It sounds like a glass cracking in the sink. Pedro left the company without warning. The papers reported it discreetly. Executive steps down after internal disagreements. What they didn't say, he was broke. He sold the cars, the watches, the investments, and still couldn't fill the hole carved by his own arrogance. One morning, Camila came to the foundation without an appointment, eyes mixing fear and regret. Can we talk, Mom? Of course, it's Pedro. He won't take help. He won't talk. I don't know what to do. Sometimes the fall is the only way to learn the value of the ground. He won't survive it. Everyone survives. Some learn later. That afternoon, I found an old note tucked in a notebook, Ottavio's handwriting. If time pulls us apart, keep everything that's invisible, courage, patience, and the will to go on. Time still returned pieces of him to me, only the ones that no longer hurt. Daniel insisted on a strategic pause. A tiny restaurant downtown, low lights, cheap wine, and the kind of silence that comforts. You look tired, he said. Maybe. Not tired of fighting. Tired of winning. Winning does that. Starting over gives breath. You say that like you know. I do. I started over when I found you again. The wine turned sweeter after that. Driving home, city lights smeared across the glass like fractured memories. For the first time in a long time, I felt something simple, calm. Not every ruin is lost. Some are the ground where rebuilding finally fits. I wrote, ruin is the price of truth. Reconstruction is the gift it leaves behind. It rained the next morning. My secretary handed me a note. There's a man waiting. No appointment. But he says you'll want to see him. Name. Pedro Villela. Everything stopped. Rain, keys, air. The name still had weight, but no longer hurt. Send him in. He came in slowly, thinner, unshaven, shoulders slumped, pride intact, even wounded. I didn't come to ask for anything, he said. Then, for the first time, we're off to a good start. A tired, honest half-smile. I lost everything, Mom. Bad investments, wrong people. All that's left is the name. And I don't think it's mine anymore. The name is just the frame. Pedro. The painting is what you put inside it. I thought Dad was the strong one. Now I see you were always holding it all up. Your father had strength. He confused strength with control. You inherited that. And you inherited what? The courage to let things fall. He gave a humorless laugh. Then his voice cracked. I wish I could go back. To do what? To listen to you more. To not repeat his mistakes. That sentence cracked what hardness I had left. I stood, walked over, and touched his shoulder. Guilt is just the rough draft of forgiveness. You've started writing yours. He hugged me for the first time since the funeral. Brief, shaky, real. Daniel slipped in after he left. I should go so I don't intrude. You don't intrude. You're the one who stays when the noise ends. What comes now? He asked. Silence. Maybe forgiveness. That night I wrote, forgiving isn't forgetting what they did to you. It's remembering without losing yourself again. I looked in the mirror, gray hair, tired eyes, and thought, time didn't steal anything. It polished what remained. Months passed. For the first time in years, peace didn't sound ironic. Horizon grew. The halls, once quiet, now rang with women's voices. Women starting over. Women rediscovering themselves. Women, like me, who had been erased and chose to relight. An autumn morning brought an invitation. National Conference on Women's Leadership. Keynote speaker, Clara Villa. I stared at the card for a long time. My name stood alone, whole, without his. The auditorium was full. Cameras, reporters, students. What moved me most were the older women in the front rows, eyes shining with recognition. For 40 years, they taught me that a strong woman is the one who endures everything. I said, today I know, a strong woman chooses what's worth enduring. I'm not an example. I'm a consequence of a generation that learned too late that submission isn't love, and silence, when imposed, is a form of erasure. Applause rolled in slowly, then swelled. Horizon was born from the end of a story. But endings are just beginnings, told differently. Today, our work reaches more than 200 women. Each one is an answer to what they tried to bury the day of my husband's funeral. When I stepped off stage, Camila waited, smiling lightly, without armor. You were beautiful, Mom. I was alive. That's enough. I want to help at the foundation. For real. No title. Just to be close. Then come. But understand, no one carries a last name here. We carry purpose. That's all I want. A few days later, Daniel placed a paper on my desk. The headline, From Silenced Widow to a Woman Who Rekindled a Country. You've become a symbol, whether you like it or not, he said. Symbols are tiring. I just want to be useful. Then you're the right kind of symbol. That night, I wrote, being remembered isn't the point. What matters is what they remember when I'm gone. Far off, the turbine lights blinked, the same machines I helped raise. The same ones that almost erased me. Now they spun for me. Life grew quiet again, a good quiet, the kind that follows work that's done its job. The women kept growing. Camila led projects. Pedro began to stand back up. For the first time, I didn't feel the urge to fix anyone. Spring morning. Daniel arrived without warning. Light suit, open collar, the look of a man who no longer needs to prove anything. Got a minute? For you, I've got all the time. You know what people never talk about? Not just starting over, but knowing when to stop, when the fight is done and the heart can finally rest. He set an envelope on the table. These came to my office, old Helix documents. Among them, a letter from you, from me, dated more than 20 years ago. It was never delivered. Want to hear it? He unfolded the paper and read, Daniel, you always understood what I meant before I said it. If fate ever puts us on the same side again, I hope it's when silence won't be a barrier, but a shelter. For a second time, bent back, school hallways, the whir of blades, the shine of a gaze that never fully went out. I wrote that, you did, and you waited for the right time to hear it back. I think the time's here, he said softly. We didn't make promises. We didn't plan. We let silence say what needed saying. He took my hand, warm, steady. Peace, without guilt. Are you staying? I asked. That depends on what, on whether you want company in the resting. Then stay. That night we had dinner on the foundation's terrace. Red wine, soft lights, the wind keeping time. We didn't talk much. Some stories don't need endings. They need continuation. I wrote, when love returns after time, it doesn't come to burn. It comes to light what remains. Years passed like the wind that turns the turbines, silent, steady, necessary. Horizon no longer needed me every day. Women who once arrived in pieces now taught others how to rebuild. I learned the same without hurry, without fear, without needing to prove I could still love. Daniel stayed by my side, not as a crutch, but as presence. Sometimes we walked mountain trails at sunset, the world turning gold. He'd say that time, when well lived, bends toward us. I believed him. One afternoon at a university, they introduced me as an icon of women's rebuilding. I chose a different line. My name is Clara Villa. I'm 71 years old, and I discovered that freedom isn't a gift, it's a choice. We renew every day. They say love has an expiration date. I learned it only changes form. Sometimes it returns in another face, in another time, and teaches you it's possible to love again, without starting from zero. That night, I sat on my porch. The wind was soft, almost conspiratorial. I opened the old notebook, the one that's been with me since the funeral, and wrote my last line. It's possible to love in our later years. It's possible to be happy without new children, without a crowd, without urgency. Prioritize yourself, and remember that impact doesn't depend on age, but on the courage to keep going after life knocks you down. I closed the notebook and looked at the horizon. The blades spun slowly, elegantly, slicing the red sky. The wind brushed my face, and for the first time, I felt that everything, absolutely everything, had been worth it. If this story touched something in you, remember, time never erases what's true. It only gives us the chance to begin again in a different way. Here, every story is a mirror, a portrait of the fights, the falls, and the restarts that make us who we are. If you have your own story of love, loss, resilience, or rebirth, share it. Your story might inspire the next episode and help someone still trying to stand. If you believe, like Clara, that it's never too late to put yourself first, to love again, and to make a difference, follow, like, and share. Because here, every true story finds a voice, and every woman who rises becomes inspiration.